Welcome to our study of magic dance, our third session, our third of this point, not exactly certain how many sessions we might have. Thanking you for your flexibility, letting go of time and space habit, and let's see how we go. I'd like to start off with, as always, really with any study that we do within the Buddha Dharma, which is to just reflect how the topic that we are engaging with here addresses the issue of suffering universally. So we're not just acquiring some information which would enable us to possibly help us navigate our life better, but we are actually going right to the bottom of what drives suffering universally. And so that's where the study that we're undertaking and the practice that comes with that, we undertake really with the awareness that this could be a remedy for suffering universally. And as such, we have this attitude which we call bodhicitta, that we understand where suffering comes from, we intend to do something about it, and we're not just doing it for ourselves, but we understand that everyone, everywhere, at all times suffers from a basic delusion, which is this fixating on this unconscious condition that constructs a self, and with that also constructing other, this duality. And this is also why we begin with, we're going to be looking at where really did this all originate. We'll look into that today. But before we do that, then specifically honoring then the principle of the wisdom dakinis, we have this homage which comes at the end of the lineage chapter to Yeshe Tsogyal, where Thinley Norbu Rinpoche then praises her, writing, "Even though born the daughter of a noble family, you found no essence in such worldly life, so you ran from your splendid castle and wandered from place to place, seeking only ultimate liberation. At the time you looked for liberation, with your incomparably exquisite form blossoming, two princes sought to make you their princess, but in the midst of their disputes, you became queen. Of the most powerful monarch, manifestation of sunrise-colored prajna body, raising the sword of stainless awareness, cutting through nets of ignorance. Even though with the supreme ruler, you became queen of the land, surrounded by a snow mountain rosary, you were utterly free of attachment. When your most wondrous betrothed offered you to the vagabond Acharya, you recognized him as no ordinary being, but the very glowing of Amitabha, and so you merged your mind with his wisdom heart. To you, Yeshe Tsogyal, I bow always, until I become the same as you." So, lineage. Just a word on lineage. Very often in the sutras, we come across this term, Riki Pumo, which means son or daughter of noble family. Now, this noble family refers actually to a particular caste. It means the caste of all sentient beings. Anybody among sentient beings, anybody within both samsara and nirvana possesses what we then call lineage. Everybody belongs to this particular caste, this particular noble family. So when we're addressing this to a noble family, it's not particularly exclusive. It includes all sentient beings, and yet it speaks about a DNA or a heritage or a pedigree or a lineage that is uncorrupted. And that's the lineage of awakening that always abides unconditionally. So in some way, we could say lineage is synonymous with what we refer to as Buddha nature. Thinley Norbu Rinpoche writes, essence lineage. And that's where we're talking about the actual uncontaminated, untainted condition that is basic to everyone, everywhere. This sanity that is never corrupted. So of course, generally in the world, we talk about lineage as it comes down through time. But here particularly, we're talking about that lineage which is beyond time, which is then this Buddha nature that is never corrupted. So that's what we mean with essence lineage in Tibetan, Dönju. So this is sometimes also a name, like the 8th Kamtra Rinpoche was called Dönju Nyima, son of essence lineage or ultimate lineage. So essence lineage is the unbreakable natural condition with continuous pure and natural energy. If we separate natural energy from its secret source, it becomes obscured and impure, and then lineage appears broken. When our subtle elements become gross, obscured by the 5 skandhas, the pure essence of the elements seem diminished or lost, but really it has only become hidden. Everything visible has invisible essence. Even cement, which seems completely gross and inert, has invisible natural essence. The substanceless source of the elements pervades all subtle and gross phenomena, even though when we have broken lineage, what is visible seems only a lifeless remainder. So this condition is universal, and in that samsara is a delusion. Samsara actually hasn't happened. Then it appears that we are divorced from or separate from this purity. But it's interesting, whenever we encounter something that rings true, we're actually able to do that because even though we might temporarily be obscured, it rings true because there's something within ourselves with which this resonates. For example, we read the Buddha's teachings and we go, aha, even though we might be, you could say, afflicted by aggression or attachment, when we read of the value of non-attachment, non-aggression, it goes, ah, this looks good. When we see this embodied in others, for example, sublime beings, we rejoice. When we see this purity obscured and we have individuals that fail really to recognize this purity and act on the basis of toxic dispositions such as anger, such as greed, and so forth, we feel repulsion. And we could say sometimes the more this lineage is uncovered, the more we actually resonate with when we encounter the embodiment of purity. So when we see a sublime being, if we have less obscuration, there's incredible joy. And so there we would say, even though it appears that we are ordinary persons, it really only appears that way because there is a natural resonance, there's a natural recognition of the quality. So that's where we look to the Guru, and particularly as we open up with devotion, then there's a deep appreciation for the Guru, which is actually where we then connect in a non-dual way with this wisdom essence. So even though presently, on the basis of our misinterpreting, mistaking reality, mistaking the luminous ground in which we then develop the 5 skandhas and the perception of the 5 elements and so on, even so, these never move from the ground. So the 5 elements are never actually corrupted. They're never moved from the ground. They're the 5 mothers. The 5 skandhas never actually are intrinsically corrupted. We would say they're the 5 Buddhas. And in this way, even though there is this temporary obscuration in which we then impute some solidity on both the external phenomena and the subjective phenomena, then this only appears as if it only appears that this essence is lost. We get caught up in our particular karmic habit with our various kleshas and so on, and appear as confused sentient beings. And yet this nature never actually we are never removed from this nature. So this of course pervades everything, all reality. Reality has never moved from its primordial ground, its primordial purity. Even though on the basis then of our obscuration, it appears that way. So we are speaking about lineage as something that is natural or innate. So we understand that when we say lineage, it is our true heritage, our true family. And this is something which is the abiding purity which is within us. When a great sage looks at us, the sage doesn't see us as impure. We might think of ourselves as incredibly impure meeting a sage and be very sort of self-conscious, awkward about our confusion. And yet the sage looks at us and appreciates that there's a little bit sort of a dysfunction taking place, but at the same time recognizing this purity. So the Buddha and sentient beings, they share natural purity, even though sentient beings, they're having a temporary bit of obscuration. So what is taking place is that the display, the natural condition of luminosity, that is the quality of this ground, it's not recognized, and that's where the sentient being then falls into duality. And yet this display actually never moves from the the display actually never moves from the primordial ground. And so there is never actually any corruption taking place. There's this continual purity. So when this purity is always there, but of course the big dividing line between sentient beings and Buddhas are whether or not there's recognition. So when we recognize, when this non-duality is understood, then we're free. When we're deluded, then it appears that we are separate from this nature, and that's where we have the sense that the Buddha is incredible and has qualities that we don't, failing to recognize these qualities as actually innately present. So while these temporary delusions, they hide this nature from us, it is never lost. And once again, I have to make a point here, which is it's not just a disclaimer, but I would say, obviously, as an ordinary person, as someone who has the deepest respect and for Thinley Norbu Rinpoche and for the subject matter and the wish that we jointly share and study this text, I have to implore, supplicate all of you, do not miss reading this. What I'm doing here is possible. I have myself, this is initial readings of this text. I think I mentioned this was a book I had with me when I did some retreat back in the 1980s. And it is dense reading. And I've had friends who said, this is difficult to read. So I'm happy to sort of, if it's of any use, discuss this a little bit in ordinary terms. But obviously, the real power and what we would call blessing really lies in reading the incredible writings of Rinpoche, which really is, like I was saying, it's where prose meets poetry, prose poetry really, where we just have something that reads like something not ordinary, out of the ordinary, and comes with such an incredible connection from direct realization of what Rinpoche is talking about. If you ever met Rinpoche, you would have seen Rinpoche living this, embodying this. So this is not just somebody who had some good idea or could regurgitate some scripture, but this really sort of spills out from what we could call the expanse of wisdom. So this lineage, this innate quality, our interaction with gross element phenomena connects with our subtle elements, and what is left is a stale remainder. So that's the way that we engage with, you could say, the diminished reality that we then have as a dualistic being, where the pure elements, the pure light phenomena, the pure five mothers are then taken to be just earth, water, fire, wind, space, and the innate disposition that is perceived in terms of the five skandhas is then diminishing the innate quality of the five Buddhas. And this way, what is pure is constructed as dualistic phenomena, and we've broken away, and we operate within a place where the subtle phenomena, they're missed on the basis of our fixating on the gross phenomena. So of course we have then inner body phenomena that it connects with the outer phenomena, as we saw in the first chapter. When we eat, then we're connecting with the earth element within, and so forth. And as we go through that, then the way that this connects results in then the stale remainder, like Rinpoche is talking about, how eating becomes excrement and so forth. So as we move away from the original, the insubstantial subtle source, then there's increasing conspicuous heavy elements that then finally are just become stale remainders. And that's where we can trace this diminished quality as we have the gross conspicuous aspect. When it separates from the subtle source, it's then gradually removed from its lineage. And even though it never moves from the original ground, there's this increasing quality of being gross. So we right down to excrement. And so when we have something that gradually removes itself from its pure source, from its lineage, then it becomes stale. It doesn't actually ultimately remove itself, but the thing is, it appears more and more distant. So likewise, also in terms of the way that we operate within time, then as we age, then gradually also the body appears to lose connection with the freshness of the original lineage. That's also why we would, for example, when we talk about something that's really close to the subtle nature, it possesses the sort of exuberance. So when something blossoms like a flower in the initial moments, has this quality of freshness. Likewise, also, for example, when we talk about the subtle, fresh aspects of enlightenment, like the Sambhogakaya, then we see deity, something that's fresh, luminous, youthful, and possesses, you could say, the heightened, the maximum qualities, really, the blossoming qualities of enlightenment in terms of the manifest aspect. And that's where we then have deity. So that's where when we practice meditation, when we practice the path, then gradually we approach this subtle nature. So we're approaching this possibly through the general path, through discipline, through meditation, through increasing wisdom in which confusion falls away. And particularly if we practice Vajrayana, then we align ourselves with this spontaneously present quality that is never corrupted. So that's within then Vajrayana. Then on the basis of 4 empowerments, we connect with the youthful quality that is the sort of the fresh, blossoming enjoyment aspect of enlightenment. So that's where we then would say, when we connect with the very source of this, we connect with what is called the youthful vase body, according to the particular system of the Nyingmapa tradition. So Thinley Norbu Rinpoche says, youth is symbolic of pure balance in Dharma, because the secret essence of the elements manifests visibly in things when they're young and their subtle and gross elements are in balance. So this sort of the insubstantial quality and potential is manifest then in the visible aspects, with externally when we see beautiful plants and so forth, and internally also when we look at our mind, the psychological condition that's not corrupted by duality, not corrupted by toxic states of mind, kleshas, habitual patterns and obscurations of various kinds, then there is a natural balance in which the actual innate, unconditional quality of the mind becomes manifest. And that's what we align ourselves with through practice. So we should understand this youth as something that, yes, it's a metaphor, but it's also something that is very visible and perceptible. So we could say when youth is where the elements are in just the perfect balance, with age, balance is interrupted, leading to old age, sickness, and death, demise. So with practice, even though there might be the outer physical aspect, which is undergoing change on the basis of the particular karmic disposition, the karmically created body, then the mind in practice is connecting with that which is unchanging and which is essentially the lineage that we're talking about here, the unchanging youth of lineage. And that's also why continually we would say all Vajrayana practice really comes from connecting with lineage, coming from connecting with blessing from the teacher and connecting with that which is entirely beyond coming and going, birth and death. So that's what then is referred to as unchanging youth. And that's also why someone who practices this in a proper way, in the consummate way, and the way that it's intended, then dissolves the ordinary fixation on the gross elements, and simply just the ordinary body then dissolves into its original condition, which is light. And then someone like that doesn't leave, when passing, they don't leave an inert corpse, but they dissolve the elements into light. Thinley Norbu Rinpoche says, for those who are able to go beyond the obstructed gross and subtle elements to their unobstructed secret essence, there is no imbalance, and so no inert gross elements are left behind. They leave a rainbow body, the pure color essence of the visible elements. And of course, we're not really talking about some fairy tale here. There are many instances of practitioners who have done this. So we can talk about lineage in terms of substance and substanceless lineage. So what we generally operate with in the ordinary world, particularly in the modern context, is a material knowledge. And that's where we even pride ourselves of having great insight into the nature of reality, merely from just, you could say, skating the surface and merely just looking at the appearances, which then are solidified into the elements. So that's where material knowledge only recognizes substantial source of phenomena. There's really only an understanding that's limited to what can be objectified, quantified, measured objectively, materially. What all the various wisdom traditions do, and that includes also traditions that operate with an insubstantial awareness, including also what we could call eternalist traditions, they operate with this substanceless aspect of mind. Particularly within then the tradition of the Buddha, then we operate with what we call substanceless wisdom mind. And that is then where we connect to unbroken wisdom mind lineage. That's again where we understand lineage as something that comes down to us from an external source, from the teachers of the lineage and going all the way back to the primordial Buddha. And yet then understanding that the primordial Buddha in and of itself, the original Buddha Samantabhadra is no different from the nature of our own mind, the lineage that we innately possess. So what we have in the external lineage are Niyamanakayas that reflect this and show us the way to connect with this through their example. And so through the lineage masters down through the ages, we have countless examples of how to connect to this unbroken wisdom mind. So Thinley Norbu Rinpoche says, if we continually recognize the secret essence which pervades all phenomena, there is natural unbroken wisdom mind lineage, which is unobstructed and without end. Lineage means the continuous, unbroken, precious qualities manifested through different forms and aspects whose essence always remains pure. So this nature then is expressed in the various manifestations, the Nirmanakaya. So the way that lineage and the awakened condition manifests in our world can be, like we often see in the sutras, it can be something like just a bridge or a wind, a breeze on a summer's day, just a natural goodness that occurs. And specifically then, we talk about the supreme wisdom manifestation as the teacher that introduces wisdom mind. But all along, we're talking about this lineage as something that we innately possess and which the path then enables us to connect to. So the practice of connecting with lineage, the pure wisdom lineages of Buddhism are then held by various great sublime masters. So this is our heritage, this is our lineage. And we would sometimes say, just like when someone who is born into a royal lineage, then right from the start, they're acknowledged as a prince or a princess, even though they haven't perhaps been authorized, they haven't been anointed as rulers of the realm and so on, then they nevertheless possess this quality. It's innate to them. So similarly also, we would say all sentient beings possess this lineage, but it's manifested then through those who fully have realized this nature. So we need, as practitioners that recognize the nature of the shortcoming of samsara and the suffering of samsara, then engaging with the path, then we connect with this pure wisdom lineage. And that has nothing to do then with being born into a particular tradition as such. This very often, and this is where Rinpoche, he would probably be more aware of this than someone like myself, as a Caucasian that came to study, also coming from a non-Buddhist tradition, coming to study in a Buddhist context. I encountered masters who were very, very unreserved, and there was never any kind of, you could say, racism going on of any kind. On the contrary, a very sort of, you could say, accommodating, gracious culture, really of welcoming in. Whereas perhaps within the insides of some of the Buddhist traditions, there probably would have been more narrow-minded persons that would say, oh yeah, but they're foreigners, they're foreign devils, they're these yellow-headed people or whatever. they could never really properly practice the path. There's a lot of that. And I also tend to agree sometimes, in Buddhist cultures, there's a lot, very often, like one Lama said, it sits in the bones of some of these cultures where Buddhism has been practiced for millennia. But at the same time also, then there is the innate lineage, which is completely beyond any kind of race or birth. So it's important also, of course, in engaging in the path, that we're not just imitating, if we're engaging in the path, that we're not just imitating behavior and customs and external practices that have a lot of value within their particular context, but they don't possess absolute value. Tongsa Khyentse Rinpoche so often makes the point about people approaching the teaching who want to approach teachers, and what they're most worried about is their own behavior and whether they're doing the right thing according to cultural customs, the white scarves and so on, which is so secondary, not entirely unimportant. It can be an expression of elegance, but also definitely not essential. Similarly also, as much as there's a whole culture of holy places throughout India, Tibet, Bhutan, China, and so on, it doesn't mean that it's only the people in these countries that have that particular lineage. So important to pay respects to the holy places of India, but we shouldn't think that only Indians then possess this talent, this lineage. So Rinpoche says, if we practice Dharma depending on ordinary substance lineage power, we cannot have deep spiritual power. The source of visible power is always invisible power. So that's where we need to go beyond behavior. This is not about it's not about imitating like monkeys, doing what the teachers are doing in terms of behavior, but actually having the sensitivity to actually gauge the insubstantial qualities that lies beyond the surface, and sees these qualities like the magnanimity, the compassion, the kindness, the sense of humor, the wisdom, etc. All these that lie beyond just the external appearances. So this isn't something that is entirely blocked, and if we want to quickly assimilate on the premise of our own ambition, what we could call spiritual materialism, this is completely inaccessible by means of just wanting or thinking in terms of ordinary, narrow, limited ambition that desires worldly prestige and wealth. Dharma is not transmitted on the ordinary ambitious terms of wanting worldly prestige and wealth. What is it Rinpoche says? Yeah, here we Rinpoche says, we may pretend to be Buddhists, but if we do not have a wisdom point of view and the compassion that the Buddha Shakyamuni revealed again and again, then whatever Dharma acts we perform are just Dharma drama for the nihilist audience to senselessly gossip about during intermission. So this happens. This probably is, I'm not going to spell this out, but this is something that might be familiar. Anyway, we don't want to do that. That's not the point. So this is again the point that lineage, Buddha nature, is not exclusive, and there's no such a thing really as somebody who has or doesn't have pure lineage. And we also wouldn't know who has actually uncovered it. Of course, all sentient beings have lineage, but sometimes it is more uncovered in some. And there might be bodhisattvas that appear to be behaving in ways that we might not associate with the spiritual laws and so on. And that's where it's impossible for us to know who is a bodhisattva, who is a sublime being, and who is displaying the qualities of this lineage or not. Rinpoche says, whether one is titled or untitled, chosen or not chosen, politician or not politician, the lineage holder is the one who has original wisdom qualities and whose mind source is wisdom purity. Whoever has vast spiritual qualities through pure intention and gifted mind from previous karma holds a pure spiritual lineage and can truly benefit other beings. So again, these qualities, that they are entirely invisible, but they are really what defines the power of and the ability to benefit others. So this has nothing to do with externals, titles, and so on. So when we hear in the teachings, sons and daughters of noble family, it's like hearing sons and daughters of lineage. Yes, actually, Gyurma Dorje, in his Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Penguin edition, he actually literally says son or daughter is possessing Buddha nature. Riki Pumo, yeah. So yes, that's how we should understand. Please, could you talk about Pema Chöntön cell and the youthful vase body? Well, if you're thinking of the Ryu Sangche, it's true. The Ryu Sangche operates very much with the language of what we're speaking about here. In fact, the magic dance actually enables us to understand certainly the preliminary practices in the Ryu Sangche, in the refuge, bodhicitta, 7 branches, and self-visualization. Very much, actually, if we practice that, we are very much continually reminded of the teachings that we have in magic dance. So yes, Pema Chöntön cell is the manifestation, the pure manifestation of the youthful vase body, and also as such, we talk about Padmasambhava manifesting as an 8-year-old, someone who is not conditioned. Padmasambhava appeared out of a lotus unconditionally and completely untouched by confusion, and so are completely at ease within the phenomenal world. And Trungpa Rinpoche, he makes an important point about this actually, where he says very often in our culture, we think wisdom is something that comes with age. You know, like a wise old grandmother or a wise old granddad, they have wisdom. And so the definition of wisdom sometimes is having a lot of either data or a lot of experience. But here, in this context, we're talking about wisdom as this nature that's uncontaminated and hence fearless. There's never ever any place in which there's some sort of something that is accumulated. It's primordially there, primordially in touch with the youthful vase body. And that's what Pema Tönchen Cell is. That's what all the various aspects of Padmasambhava really embody. This quality of innocence that is completely without any duality and completely at home fearlessly at home within the phenomenal world. And so also Guru Rinpoche's life unfolds itself very differently from, say, the Buddha, which was very much about recognizing the suffering of the world and renouncing, and in this way demonstrating actually the path, but demonstrating the gradual path. Whereas Guru Rinpoche demonstrates the path from the point of view of the resultant uncorrupted wisdom that is spontaneously present. And so his life is really the demonstration of the whole Vajrayana spirit. So that's where when we're taking refuge in Pema Tönchen Cell, we're taking refuge in this primordial quality that is innate to lineage, that which we are in the family. We're the sons and daughters of Pema Tönchen Cell, if you like. And that's where we're taking refuge within that quality that is abiding spontaneously, primordially, and in which all the qualities of samsara and nirvana are completely embodied. You know, like we say, you know, Pema Tönchen Cell, who embodies all the qualities of samsara and nirvana. So yeah. Habit, dream, and time. So quoting from the Ratnakuta Sutra, what's that? Konjuktin? Something like that. In which it says, my form appeared like a dream to sentient beings who are like a dream. I taught them dreamlike teaching to attain dreamlike enlightenment. Apologize for the corruption in the typing there. But here then, we often give the example that the Buddha is like somebody who, or the Bodhisattva is somebody who like enters into the dream of someone and teaches enlightenment within a dream. So like it's a dream, then there's never actually anybody who's ever moved from lying within the bed of their primordial lineage or their primordial purity, and yet within the delusion that takes place within the dream, there is happiness and suffering and confusion. And so the Buddha enters into that dream, even though sentient beings had never moved from their original ground, just like somebody who's hallucinating, dreaming up and afraid of things or experiencing things that are actually not there. So when they come to, they realize that there was never actually the case of everything they worried about was never there. So similarly, also the Buddhas look at sentient beings and know that they are undergoing a delusional condition. So that's where the Buddha then goes in and skillfully working with the particular dream perceptions and the dream phenomena, skillfully enables them to first achieve happiness and ultimately complete awakening. So Rinpoche says, from beginningless time, there are no habits in unconditioned natural mind. Still, we create a habit by dividing phenomena from clear space. Inherently, a mirror does not have any dust. Still, it attracts and gathers dust, which obscures its natural clarity. In the same way, our pure wisdom mind becomes obscured by ego when we become attached to its pure phenomena's unobstructed display. If we can recognize our natural stainless mind, we will not become obscured through attachment. But if we do not recognize our pure natural mind, then our subtle elements phenomena gather like dust on our clear mirror mind. So from the point of view of the mind's own condition, there's just like a mirror is actually never, this is also a point that Tongtse Rinpoche so often makes. You know, if you're cleaning a window, you're actually not doing anything to the window. You're just removing the grime, the dust that obscures the window. So you can't say you're actually cleaning the window. You're just removing what obscures us to perceive the window. The window doesn't actually care if we can see through the window or not. And the same, Rinpoche gives this example of the shirt. You know, Rinpoche would, you know, confounding everybody, would say, you know, the shirt is never dirty. You know, the shirt only appears to us as being dirty on the basis of the extraneous, you know, dirt or whatever it might be. So window and shirt and mirror is actually never corrupted by the settling of the external dust. And our confusion lies not in that we have the display of phenomena, but it lies in us objectifying on the basis of a confused sense of self, then objectifying the display as other. Then we perpetuate the toxic conditions and the patterns of klesha and karmas. And that's where then we corrupt and fail to recognize the innate disposition. So if we wipe the mirror of natural mind, the dust of dualistic habit doesn't settle. So this is what we do with practice. When we're practicing, we are actually just, we're not constructing anything. We're just preventing confusion from, you know, getting a grip on us. So that's where, when we're practicing, this is a place where we align ourselves with and connect with a condition that's free from the ordinary dualistic entanglement. You know, sometimes I think of this. This is a little bit on a tangent, but you know, if ever you've read the story about Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Chan Buddhism in China, Huineng, when he was young, he heard the Diamond Sutra. He was a young boy, and he was just sitting in a marketplace, I forget where, somewhere in China, and he just heard some monk chant the Diamond Sutra, and he immediately, delusion just fell away. And then he went to study with the fifth patriarch, and he really just worked in the kitchen cutting wood and just working in the kitchen. And there was a very advanced, close student of the fifth patriarch there, and there was other students around the fifth patriarch. At one point, the fifth patriarch wanted to have a lineage holder, and he then said, "I'd like to have someone please make a poem that expresses their realization." And so one of the advanced student there, he wrote, you know, not wanting to make a big display, he just wrote somewhere on a wall somewhere with some chalk. He just wrote, the mind is like a mirror. Practice is eliminating the dust that settles on the mirror. And then so everybody sort of saw that and sort of went, oh, pretty good, pretty good. And then one night, Huineng, he sneaks in and he just writes down underneath. He writes, if there is no mirror, how can there ever be any dust that could settle? And of course, the fifth patriarch, he thought that was pretty cool. And who had written that? And then, of course, it turned out to be Huineng. And then he was actually, you know, he was then appointed to be the patriarch. He incidentally actually lived many years then anonymously without, even though he received the robe, and I think it was a copy of the Lankavatara Sutra or something like that, as really the symbols of being the sixth patriarch. He actually, for many years, he just lived as a cook, I think with some hunters. And it was only later on, due to circumstances, he began to sort of act for the benefit of sentient beings. But you know, I'm saying this because I always thought that the advanced student, you know, even though he wasn't appointed the lineage holder of the fifth patriarch, not so bad, you know. That is really what we do with practice. And of course, yes, if we just immediately are beyond any duality, for sure, there's no notion of any then need to wipe anything. But at the same time, as ordinary practitioners, yes, that is in fact what we're doing. We're continually sustaining freshness of mind when, you say, dull, habitual, how do you say, gross excrement mind sort of starts to pile up. So that's where, if we are unaware, and this is what happens when we're distracted, then habits, they settle, they stick, they become part of us. That's how kleshas become then karma, and they become part of us. So we need a habit. And of course, that is where, as long as we're on the gradual path, yes, we need to have a habit, but that's really just a minor delusion, and also something that Tsongtse Rinpoche often quotes, I think, Vasubandhu. Sometimes Rinpoche says Shantideva, sometimes he says Vasubandhu. I think it might be Vasubandhu, but anyway, we should keep the one delusion is necessary, and that is the delusion of the path. And so that's where, yes, the path is still a veil, but it's a very subtle veil. Whereas the ordinary karma and the ordinary kleshas, that unless we practice actually begin to completely rule us, they really obscure us heavily. Of course, ultimately, then any kind of dualistic reference obscures us. And that's why we would say, even though there might be, subtle beings great beings might display some, still have some apparent shortcomings. They might do it for sentient beings. They might have some, subtle obscuration still at the higher bhumis. Yet, as long as there are such reference points, there's still obscurations. So clouds, Rinpoche says, clouds, whether they are black or white, are still clouds which obscure. So we might have gotten rid of the black clouds of heavy obscurations, and then eventually also we need to relinquish the subtle white clouds of, you could say, virtue and the path. So the heavy elements, habit of ordinary beings are persistent, like the smell of a musk gland. Light element habits of sublime beings are like the residual scent left after removing the musk. So on the path, we would say there is the practitioners, they, at a certain level, then through seeing, they're free. They, at the level of the path of, we talk about the 5 paths, and at the level of the path of seeing, then there is essentially freedom. But still there's subtle obscurations that need to be eliminated, and that's then eliminated through what we call the path of meditation. And that's where there's seeing, and yet there's still the subtle obscurations of that residual scent. Like if we have a perfume bottle and we pour out the perfume, then there might not be any perfume left in the bottle, but still the bottle has that scent. So we should understand that the confusion that we have that arises, just like we talked about earlier, the dust on the mirror. So just like we, for example, might have greenery and grass and so on that grows on a mountain, or we might have clouds arising in space, they actually don't contaminate or aren't basic to the mountain. They're external to the mountain, they're external to space. Likewise, also these habits that we have in terms of our delusion, they are external. Now, even though they arise, they are external to our fresh, boundless mind, to the original innate lineage. If we settle in mind's nature without fixating on the emergent phenomena, we remain free from delusion. So this is what we do on the practice of the path. In terms of the general practice of the path, we sustain this vipassana that doesn't subscribe and get entangled in ordinary dualistic fixation. And then within the yoga then of the Vajrayana, we align ourselves with this abiding purity that is completely uncontaminated. So Rinpoche says, mind is like pure, limitless ground. If we are not attracted to and do not cling to our finite, limited phenomena, then we remain. Then we can remain in our fresh, boundless mind. So this is what we're encouraged to do on the path. actually right from the word go, from the first practices that we undertake on the path of individual liberation, right up to Ati Yoga, everything that we're doing is really aligning ourselves, approaching or aligning ourselves with this fresh, boundless mind. So while we have this happening in the ordinary world, externally in our waking state, this is also something that plays into our nighttime dream. So subtle habits are present in the gross habits, whether we are awake or dreaming. So it's when we fall asleep and dream then that these become visible, these subtle habits that are always there, all our sort of subtle hopes and fears, all the things that only we know. You know, we appear in one way or another in the external world, and we are sort of operating on the premises of really just navigating the external world. But all this time, there's a subtle, what really is happening within ourselves that only we know, is all the time taking place. So Rinpoche says, just like stars are still there during the day, it's only at night that these become visible. So similarly also, at nighttime, these habits become visible. So that's why they're reflected in our dreams. And Rinpoche then talks a little bit about the science of dreams, where we could, of course, read things, particularly we'd say before we wake up in the morning, then sometimes we can read dreams that might have indications about things to come. Also, if we have bad dreams, there are things we can do. But if we really are approaching wisdom mind, then whether we have good dreams or bad dreams are really secondary. Rinpoche says we should have neither bad feelings and fears about bad dreams, nor good feelings and expectations about good dreams, but should try to dissolve our conceptions into luminosity space, which is what we then do with the practice of the path. Particularly, the way that we engage in the path according to the Vajrayana when we practice deity, when we practice sadhana practice, this is where our vipassana then is our practice of vipassana is to engage Buddha nature, this lineage, as it abides inseparably, originally within ourselves, as you could say, the innate, pure body, speech, and mind. And this is where we then practice the yoga of visualizing deity body, connect with the pure energy of speech through reciting mantra, and the yoga of luminosity through connecting with the mind that's not contaminated by conceptual mind. Then if we engage with this kind of practice, then dream then mingles, and that's where we sustain our whole sense of body, speech, and mind also within the dream state. And that's where we have this clarity in which we are familiar through the daytime to interact with phenomena without falling into dualistic confusion. And this then also enables us in a greater extent to transform, to recognize, and to transform the experiences that we have in the dreams into wisdom phenomena, basically engaging with practices that go beyond our ordinary habitual patterns, and essentially engage the practice of bodhicitta within the dream. So while we do that, and this is what we aspire to do, the reality is, of course, that habits follow us. So habit is something that continually is a challenge, where we're habituated to rather unimaginative samsaric ideas, beliefs, assumptions, psychology, etc. So that's where changing from ordinary habit to sublime habit takes time. So that's where we could see persons that engage in the path gradually then begin to have different habits, begin to have the habits of yogis and practitioners. These kind of practices found everywhere in various traditions. And we, of course, very often would think, oh yeah, this is a very virtuous person. Regardless of culture we go into, there'll be some people who are seen to be wise and so forth. And the purpose of wisdom everywhere is for us to no longer be caught in our delusion. So regardless of culture, you would have persons that have less ignorance, are less stupid, are less prone to be entangled in confusion. They really are, these traditions universally, really, they are what, like this classical example we have of the speckled or striped rope that we misperceive and think it's a snake. And the wisdom traditions universally, they are really what they awaken us or alert us to. I think I better edit that. Hold on. Let's see here. We'll do that, yeah. I use this example a lot. Obviously, everybody does. But remember in one retreat, we had actually somebody, they went for a walk and they saw a real snake and they were very happy that they didn't mistake it for being a striped rope. So apply discernment with this one here. But of course the image is it's such a good image, really. Particularly because we kind of, well, if you live in Australia, particularly, you would know the sort of the general ingrained awareness there is around the possibility that you could stumble on a poisonous snake is quite present. So maybe it's because I'm living in Australia, I use this image a lot. Anyway, it's really about seeing through delusion. Rinpoche gave this life as cinema. Some of the older students remember, right? Rinpoche would simply say the Buddha is someone that goes in and just taps us gently on the shoulder in the cinema and says, you know, it's just a movie. And we kind of go, oh yeah, that's right. So yet, after the Buddha has tapped us on the on the shoulder and told us it's a movie, then 2 minutes later we completely engrossed, right? So that's where changing habit is not easy, but clearly we must. Thinley Norbu Rinpoche says, according to the Dharma point of view, the purpose of all practice and teaching is to purify ego's habit in order to change negative phenomena into positive phenomena. And this, by the way, is not positive psychology. This is simply just seeing phenomena as they are in their intrinsic purity. So that's where we would, when we see phenomena in their purity, then it's understanding phenomena without the overlay of our dualistic projection. And that's where we combine what we call relative truth and absolute truth, that we see absolute truth within the relative perceptions. And that is what we call mandala, that is what we call deity. And that's also where in the Vajrayana we talk about relative truth in terms of its purity. So that's where we see the dualistic phenomena free from the ordinary tainted dualistic perception, and hence free from the ordinary kleshas, the ordinary toxic reactive patterns that we have. We begin to see phenomena with less, you could say, in their more raw condition, with less censorship. We see phenomena more real, and that's where we see their innate purity, free from duality. And that's what we here refer to as breaking free of ego's habits and changing negative phenomena into positive phenomena. So this is not good against bad. This is really just an increasing degree of seeing phenomena in a valid, accurate way. So once we have fallen into duality, then we solidify our experience. So once we have this initial ignorance, and I think we talked about how you have the 12 links of dependent origination, or we have the first skandha form, all of that originates simply with our ignorance, unawareness. And then we begin to construct self and other, and with that we then construct a delusion of space as other, and with that increasing solidification we have the notion of time. And that's where we then begin to have cause and effect, and the way that we obscure ourselves. So as we increasingly solidify space, we become obscured in our perception of past and future. So that's where we no longer are free from this duality in which all phenomena are seen clearly. Their past is obscured. As we become fixated then on the particular immediate, what is in front of us, then we fixate on the present, and then we lose sight of both the past, and it becomes something that's just inert, no longer perceived as being present, and the future is also obscured for us. So at the same time, those that are less obscured, they have very clear awareness of past and also very clear sense of the future, and very often read in the present. They read an understanding of what has brought us here in terms of understanding how past conditions have constructed where we are, and also how the present conditions, they indicate what will come. So this is, of course, the scope of sublime beings, where Rinpoche says ordinary beings are sealed within the present as if by a thick wall, or he doesn't say that verbatim, but that's what he's implying. And sublime beings such as bodhisattvas, they see things more clearly. And then finally, Buddhas, they have no obstruction whatsoever. So that's where we very often come across this phenomenon that sublime beings, you would go and ask them, you know, what should I do in terms of what's coming up in the future? And very often we also go to sublime beings with regards to things that have happened in the past. And sublime beings don't really see any of these phenomena different from the immediate present. Every perception of the past takes place in the future. Every sort of, you could say, speculation about the future is taking place in the present. And sublime beings, they read then the present, the future clearly, or certainly clearer than ordinary dualistic beings do. So in general, we would say, when it comes to the awakened ones, or particularly the Buddha, we would say the Buddha possesses two kinds of wisdoms. One is the wisdom that is free from obscuration. There's no longer any confusion. There's the wisdom of the Dharmakaya. There's complete awakening, which is absence of delusion, coming back to the innate original condition, recognizing without any confusion. But also, the body of the Buddha is naturally this quality of the Rupakaya of compassion. So that's where there's an ability to also understand, empathize, and completely be privy to the experiences of sentient beings in all the variety of sentient beings' appearances. So that's where then the Buddha is able to benefit sentient beings. Otherwise, the Buddha would be off on a different dimension and would have no contact with the ordinary experiences of ordinary sentient beings. So that's where we talk about then Buddhas having these two kinds of wisdoms, and then being, on the basis of that, being able to benefit sentient beings according to their particular experience. Rinpoche says, everywhere, time is very fickle, since it is within substance, and it is always changing and becomes inert. If we try to make it exact while relying on impermanent substance, we become frustrated and crazy. So that is where we probably at one point gauge and understand how time is something that's very relative. This is how we all have different experiences of time. And Rinpoche also talks about how people who are very much sort of, one person has a very clear understanding of time in one way, and another person has a very different experience of time. This we experience when we make appointments with each other, right? So so anyway, the convention then is based on sort of an external gross phenomena, and of course we talk about time in particular, ways, but it is something that is very relative. Also within Western philosophy, this is something that's very much talked about as something that, well, as much as we talk about it in terms, we have atomic clocks and all these things, right? But at the same time, this is entirely something that's a construct. And so Rinpoche gives these examples of how yogis, they construct one particular breath as a moment of time. Eskimos, they construct it in a different way. And time is understood very differently in different contexts. So it's something that is entirely a relative construct. So we all then, based on our different elements, meaning the different dispositions that we have various ways, as much as we have, watches, you very often have that with parents, and you say to their kids, don't you have a watch? Or just friends, who very often could, get very upset with each other because they have a different relationship to time. So in the beginning, practitioners, of course, experience ordinary time, and they experience that as we would do, right? As what we could call actual relative truth that we discussed in the second chapter in terms of general and individual phenomena. And then the more we understand the relativity of that, then also we understand even the ordinary conception of, you could say, precise time, which is very valid, is also seen to be just a construct. And that's where we begin to understand how that in itself also is deceptive relative truth. And that's where practitioners, they then abide within what we would call Vajra time, the fourth time, the time beyond time. Of course, this is then where there's an increasing degree of vipassana, an increasing degree of realization, in which we're no longer caught in dualistic phenomena. Then there is the freedom from these constructions. So, and then finally at the level of awakening, then we have what Rinpoche speaks about. They experience timeless time, what he refers to as equanimitous, timeless time. Yeah. Sonia was there. She was the one actually who was experiencing this at the retreat. The big brown snake was quite worrying. That's right. How does delusion of space occur? How do we solidify space? Well, this is where we, in Buddhism in general, would say the condition of sentient beings is one of delusion of ignorance. And it's not that anybody has done anything bad. So there's a big difference between what we might think in terms of the fall or original sin, that something actually bad has taken place. It's the Buddhist perspective is really just, it's just a what we call fleeting obscuration. And that is the initial moment in which we go wrong. And there's actually, I always refer to a beautiful chapter in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by Chögyam Trungpa, and I'll upload it in the reading. It's in a chapter called The Development of Ego. This is actually published in French. I remember it was, I think, Michel Albin that published the French translation of Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. It's such a classic. So you have it in French, and it's a chapter in English that's called The Development of Ego. And Trungpa Rinpoche describes beautifully how we initially have this moment of basically having too good a time. And all of a sudden we become self-conscious of, I'm having such a good time. And that's where all of a sudden, he compares it to a dance. If you're dancing beautifully, you might dance without any self-consciousness. And then either you think, I'm really dancing well, or somebody says, gosh, you're dancing beautifully. And then all of a sudden, you and space become sort of a clunky relationship. And that's where this duality sets in. So he gives this as an example, but he presents beautifully, very much drawing on the great perfection tradition, which talks about what we call the original, what is it again? Yeah, the original cause, which is this moment of illusion, just losing it, and then we begin to think I and space, I and other, and this then is where we go into what we call the co-emergent ignorance, and then what we call labeling ignorance. So that's where it begins to develop. You also have a beautiful prayer that we often chant in the Nyingma tradition called the prayer of Kunta. So it comes from this chapter, this tantra called the unimpeded wisdom mind of Samantabhadra, Gompa Sangta. And in there, there's one of the chapters, I think it's the 19th chapter, that's then a prayer, beautiful prayer, that essentially describes how Samantabhadra sees the condition of samsara and how the condition of samsara never moves. So in there, there's a beautiful description of actually how this initial moment of solidifying duality takes place. So between these two, the development of ego by Chögyam Trungpa and the prayer of Kunta Zampo, you have some very good reference points. Could you explain where the distinction is made between gross and subtle phenomena? Well, gross is really just, we could say, visible phenomena as it's constructed by us in terms of the external world, and also the gross phenomena in terms of our egocentric experience. So as much as the external gross phenomena appears solidly, under the way that we project onto it, there's an underlying condition of space. And that's where the subtle phenomena abides in terms of the 5 elements that we are in this context referring to as the 5 wisdom dakinis. And internally, where we experience self with all the experience of feeling, concepts, impulse, consciousness, and all of that, what we call the 5 skandhas, this condition that's never moves actually from the original purity, and that's what we then refers to as the 5 wisdoms. So essentially, the difference, the distinction between gross and subtle phenomena are made whether or not phenomena are perceived through the lens of dualistic confusion, ego. Thank you for mentioning there's a French translation, de rien. And pure mind, don't understand how it can be contaminated. Maybe obscured but not contaminated. Well, that's right. You're right. It is actually not ultimately it's not ultimately obscured. It's not ultimately contaminated. Just like somebody who's having a hallucination or having a nightmare, they're not actually, the experience that's taking place is not ultimately actually truly happening. It's just perceived that way. So the Buddha has compassion for sentient beings that are perceiving self and essentially who've lost their way, so to speak. Yeah. Can Buddha nature be contaminated or confused? No. And that's the point. Lineage, and this is the point that Rinpoche is making here, lineage is never really ultimately corrupted, but it might appear that way. So go back into the first lines of that chapter on lineage, and that's where he says, essence lineage is the unbreakable natural connection, which with continuous pure and natural energy. If we separate natural energy from its secret source, it becomes obscure and impure, and then lineage, now comes the operative word, appears broken. So there's a perception of it being broken, but it isn't actually. So likewise, also, just like the window appears to be dirty, but it actually isn't. So channels, tigles are a part of gross phenomena. Well, actually, no. Well, that's actually interesting. Sort of from the Sokrim or the yoga position, we would say channels, they actually, they innately are actually pure. And tigle and so on, even, well, yes, all of these, they constitute the pure aspect of our being. So even though we are karmically constructed, there's a dimension of bodhicitta, there's a dimension of purity that we engage with. It's very clear when we practice hatha yoga, even just ordinary hatha yoga at your local evening school or wherever, then just doing a particular asana, already there's a sense of well-being. And that's actually from connecting with a pure dimension. So when we practice Vajrayana, we're connecting with the subtle, pure aspect that's manifest, that abides within our obscured karmic body. So there's a big difference between when we slouch and when we actually adopt a yogic posture. And that, so we would actually say that through the skillful means of using the Vajra body, then we can connect with the unconditional. That's even more subtle, the secret essence. So they're actually not part of gross phenomena. They're embedded within the gross phenomena, but are actually subtle phenomena. That's again where you could say Buddha nature never gives up on us. Buddha nature permeates the physical and also the verbal dimension. For example, the whole Sanskrit alphabet that is basic to mantra. That's also the subtle aspects of sound. So again, this is something that is close to the lineage, close to the original freshness of our Buddha nature. In regards to lineage, does that mean Samaya only appears to be broken? It's not actually broken. But this is slightly different. That's more the discipline. So when we have a particular commitment to the path, then we abide by the particular discipline. So, for example, if we have if we practice meditation, then it's important that we practice meditation every morning, or we abide by a particular. For example, we might take a vow not to be sort of angry, or we might take a vow to abide in a particular way, to whatever it might be, the spiritual discipline might be. Then the moment that when we no longer abide by it, it actually bothers us more. So for an ordinary person who never thought that there was any problem with being angry, or any problem with you could say overeating, or any problem with for example, people who practice yoga, ordinary persons, they wouldn't suffer from not practicing yoga, but somebody who practices yoga, they actually begin to suffer when they don't uphold their yoga discipline, or if somebody is meditating, they don't uphold their practice or abide by particular exercises in terms of non-aggression or whatever it might be. So any spiritual discipline that we first connect with and then disconnect with, it actually sits and bothers us. But of course, the good thing about that is that it can always be repaired. So we always talk about, through the practice of the path, we're always repairing and you could say realigning ourselves. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, the subtle phenomena, yes, some people can see them. Yeah. You know, it's when you know somebody, there might be somebody who acts in a stupid way, but you know them really well, and you know that they actually are just a bit confused. You have it with children, for example. If you're a parent and your kids are really misbehaving, you know that they're actually good underneath, yeah? And similarly, also, if you have a friend that you know is a really great person, but somehow, due to circumstances, they might sort of act in ways that don't actually really represent who they truly are. We know that there's something that's pure underneath. And likewise, also persons who have a sensitivity, like for example, the Buddha would look at sentient beings and see their purity. And similarly, also we look at a Buddha and we might not necessarily see them purely. I remember once somebody came out from having seen Dingchen Rinpoche and said, "Oh, I see him just like a Buddha." And Ujin Topchel was there, and he said, "Oh yeah, you see Dingchen just like a Buddha." And he, he was saying to us, that's actually implying that that person would be a Buddha, him or herself. So it would only really be a Buddha that can truly see, that can see the qualities of a Buddha. But of course, this person had a good intention. There's nothing wrong in what this person had said, but it's just that it actually takes one to know one. So that's where persons with less obscurations, they can more easily perceive the pure aspects. But nevertheless, they're there. And so it's the rishis, the yogis, that could actually see the pure aspect of and engage with the pure aspect. And that's from this angle that we have practices such as yoga and mantra and so on. Okay, there's a little bit of time. Hey, let's just look at this last one here, play mind. This is such a good chapter. So our uptightness, our lack of play mind consolidates the dualistic divide between subject and object. When children connect with their toys, they have joy. If not, they get serious and become unable to connect. We would want to sustain play mind to connect with our subtle phenomena. So what we're talking about here is that when we begin to really have that strong, when we get overly serious, then we solidify other. Let's say we're working with something. Initially it's fun, but then it's not working quite. You know, we get a new gadget. Let's say we're excited and we get a new mobile phone, right? This is something we all know, right? So you're excited about your new phone, right? And then you have to set it up. And before you've known it, you already used 3 hours and it's no more fun. You're actually seriously frustrated. So that's similar with children and their toy, you know, initially fun, and all of a sudden, you know, what happens is we go narrow, we become very small. So for us to actually connect with the truth of phenomena, we're not just talking about a sort of a nice positive experience, we're just talking about the actual truth of phenomena. That's where we need to maintain this lightness that doesn't play mind here is not, we're not saying silly mind. We're not talking about a frivolous mind, an indulgent mind. We're talking about a clear mind of vipassana, a clear mind of insight that has the confidence of not getting entangled psychologically or in terms of the engagement with the phenomenal world. So that's what we want to sustain. That's where the separation, when we lose that awareness, then we become frustrated. So that's where if we have calm, playful mind, there's not this kind of turbulence between gross and subtle elements. So Rinpoche says separation is always the cause of frustration, whether between parents and child, friend and friend, husband and wife, or teacher and disciple. When we cannot connect with each other because of our previous habit of dividing subject from object and gross from subtle, then frustration and anger result. When we feel this frustration and anger, we must try to dispel it, not by further dividing the object of our frustrated anger, but by practicing Dharma and by meditating. And that's where it's important that when we have a frustrating situation as practitioners, we know it's not going to help to try to make the others behave or set up a set of rules or try to sort of work with a gross way, but rather we just need to come back to practicing Dharma, meditating, letting go of uptight mind. Rinpoche used to use this a lot, uptight. He loved Rinpoche. Really, there were some words that his close students will confirm this. There were some English words that he really caught on to, and uptight was one. I remember going to a teaching with Rinpoche, and he would use this quite a lot with the audience. He was so skillful with the audience, with his students. Spiritual energy exists naturally, but like young plants, it can be burnt by the fire of anger. So there's a natural innocence that can get scorched when we get angry, aggressive. Then both the subtle and gross are consumed, and we're left with the ashes of sadness. Whatever, even on a very ordinary level, we set out to achieve didn't work out. So with neither support of subtle or gross, we become weak and sorrowful. So we're not skillful, either in, you could say, a secular, ordinary sense. Forget about spiritual. So having a bit of play, a bit of bliss sustains spiritual energy. So playing is not bad. Some of you would have remembered the name of the rose, Umberto Eco's novel, and it was put to a movie. But that's where there's a chapter in which I think it was something written by Aristotle or some commentary of some, some scripture, in which it extols the virtue of laughter. And yet the uptight abbot of a particular monastery thought that chapter that extolled the virtue of laughter and joy could undermine the discipline. So he put, I think, arsenic on the pages. So anybody who was reading in their secret library, who came to that chapter, who began to read in it, they would turn the pages and they would ingest the arsenic and die. So that's where there sometimes is a misunderstanding that spirituality has to be very serious. So Rinpoche says we need play mind when we study. This enables us to absorb the material. Also, when we get uptight, we try and notice when we're trying to absorb something. If we're uptight, very difficult for it to penetrate. With rigid and serious mind, we cannot learn. With serious mind, we're tired. With play mind, we're rested. So if we practice the Dharma, we don't get tired. When we're practicing Dharma, then it lifts us. When we get uptight in terms of ordinary activities, it brings us down. That's why also very important when we're practicing Dharma, we do that with Dharma in terms of Dharma, not in terms of serious, rigid mind. Rinpoche says, if we're serious and rigid, our subtle elements become congested and cannot reflect this wisdom display. If our mind is calm and vast and playful, we can always recognize the essence display. In open space, there is never turbulence between gross and subtle elements. So if we sustain that openness, no conflict between secular and dharmic. Without play mind, we miss what is beautiful through lack of confidence. And that's the thing. Play mind comes with confidence. This is something that if we have good friends, they'll make fun of us when we get overly uptight and overly serious. And we can see their confidence. They might not be, gloating, but they're just out of compassion and love for us. They'll see how we've gotten caught up in uptightness and seriousness, and hopefully they will make fun of us. And they're coming from a place of insight, not gloating, but from a place of confidence that sees how we have sort of gone down a rabbit hole. So that's where we become very awkward and practically, inoperative. Without play mind, we cannot fight or debate properly. Even if we were to want to confront somebody or we want to prove somebody wrong, we're lacking confidence. We're lacking the aerial perspective. We're lacking a sense of humor. We're lacking play mind. The words don't come very well. We fail. So that's where somebody who has some confidence and is relaxed, even their view is completely, invalid and flawed, they might actually beat us in debate just because they're much more chilled than we are. Rinpoche says, if we are too serious and tense, we will always be defeated by our adversary, who has a more relaxed mind and who understands that confidence is always lost through nervousness. With play mind, then, we're beyond pure and impure. We're not caught up in these right, wrong. With play mind, we easily adapt to new customs. We fit in. With play mind, we benefit from the practice of meditation. Otherwise, meditation might become a slog. That's where, sometimes, I'm too tired to meditate, That's where meditation is sort of a drag. And that's a lack of play mind. With play mind, we will naturally see wisdom deity. We're naturally in touch with that which is uncontaminated. Rinpoche says, if we are practicing visualization and have no expectation, then whatever kind of deity we visualize, we will spontaneously see wisdom deity. So there we are aligning ourselves with the uncontaminated dimension of non-duality in which it would be obscured if we were thinking, oh yeah, I want to have this experience of non-duality, I want to see deity, etc. I want all of that. Then we have ambition. We're very serious. Rinpoche says, many teachers and texts say that we must be serious and diligent in our practice. But serious diligence does not mean only strict and narrow discipline. If we separate diligence from open space, it is the cause of ignorance. Real diligence is always the continuous energy of open play mind. Whenever we meditate, if we can leave our natural mind alone in play mind, our serious grasping mind cannot disturb us. We need a balanced mind between grasping too tightly and relaxing too loosely. When there is no more serious grasping mind, enlightenment is effortlessly close. So that's where Machi Glabdran, she said, you know, how do you say, be tight with the tightness and be loose with the looseness, meaning don't get too tight. Hold back with your tightness, and also with the looseness, don't be too loose either. So finding that fine place where the strings of the guitar, they're neither tightened too tightly or loose, they're just right. So that's the quality of open play mind. So Rinpoche says, where there is dualism, there is rejection and acceptance. Where there is rejection and acceptance, there is the cause of aversion and attachment. Where there is aversion and attachment, there is the cause of samsara. So this is where, on the basis of ignorance, we think self, other. That's where we begin to have like and dislike. With that, we have the kleshas, attachment, aversion. With that, we then have the habits when we begin with our body, speech, and mind to engage. The kleshas, these begin to ingrain themselves in our mind, our all ground, as karma. And that's where then we construct ourselves as karmic individuals who are fueled by kleshas. So that is what really keeps us revolving in samsara, what we call karma and kleshas. So the play mind, or lack thereof, this has all to do with what takes place in terms of us getting into samsara and also us freeing ourselves, the path of liberation. So what the Buddha ultimately, with all the 84,000 teachings, really intends is for us to connect with that which is not contaminated, which is pure light energy. So this play mind is essential for the wisdom, which is then the nature of the path. And that's what we're then relying on in order to free us from confusion and attain enlightenment. So that's it. So I hope your play mind will tolerate that we're going a few minutes over time. Can you share with us examples of how Dinghu Rinpoche or other sages had very warm and inclusive humor? There's a few stories that come to mind. I'll try to remember something for next time. Okay. All right. Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, and perception in the state of divinities, mantras, and dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret great yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Okay. Thank you.